This is good and very good. So I invite you to listen deeply to these excerpts from the section called Your Impersonal Self in Living the Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, beginning on page 130. Here we go. Your true self constitutes the only mediator between the visible and the invisible. I am that self. Be still and know that you are one with me, and my being is you in your life. It is your body, mind, the glory of your spirit. I am the Christ at the center of every soul, human yet divine, manifest and unmanifest. When the recognition comes within you of this, I am that which I am, you will have discovered your true Savior. You will know you are a projection of myself, forever, different from every other projection, immortal, yet forever expanding. Hence, the world is formed by the power of my word in you. For your word is my word in you. Your thought is my thought in you. Your power is my power in you. To think, how to think is to know how to create. So let us use the creative power of our spoken word together with conviction as we say the affirmation for the month together. Ready?
Accept that I am rooted in the divine, a unique individualization of the living spirit. I know this truth and I live this truth. I accept my unlimited capacities for love, wisdom, creativity, and joy.
Yes, and so it is.
And so it is. And by the way, I'm going to bring the book up here. This entire month is inspired by this beautiful book by Ernest Holmes, which is in our bookstore too, by the way, for those of you who don't have it. And that entire section that Carolyn read from is just a smidgen of what's in there. And it's just so beautiful and inspiring to hear these words of truth. I know when I read them, it reverberates through my entire being. I get God bumps. I can feel the truth of it. It's so beautiful. And you know that passage and many of the other things that we hear here are examples of our already rootedness in the divine, which is our theme for the month. And it's not only the theme here, it's the theme in the Science of Mind magazine, and it's the theme throughout all of the Center for Spiritual Living communities all over the planet. So we join in this common theme, which is very exciting in terms of thinking of our oneness with each other, and that we are all bringing this beautiful truth to the surface and to the awareness of each one of us, our rootedness in the divine. And Jesus spoke about this rootedness. Now, he was a great spiritual teacher of this truth when he said, "Ye are God's children of the Most High." A lot of times that hasn't been brought to the surface, but that's what he said. I mean, it was there in the scriptures. And the kingdom of God is within. Heaven is within. He didn't say heaven is someplace we go to after we die. He said heaven is within our very own being. The divine is within. And when he said, I and the Father are one, he didn't, I guarantee you, he didn't mean only himself. This is the truth of all of us, right? I and the Father meaning that divine presence within us. Another word for that. And then Yogananda, many other mystics have taught this too, but I wanted to give you just a little example from Yogananda. I found this on the internet, this beautiful quote about, because I know he speaks about Christ consciousness. And he said, to find the real Christ, you must expand your consciousness as Jesus did. Behave toward all with love as the children of your own Father. Again, Father with a capital F. And then he talked about how to do that. So that was how to do it physically in physical bodies. But he also talked about how to do it spiritually. He said to do that, meditate until you feel the vast joy of God through Christ consciousness. So that's from Yogananda. A different spiritual tradition, but a recognition of truth, of higher truth. So today, last week we talked about the personal aspect of self, or the personal self, realizing that we are all individualizations of the one source, never separate, always fully rooted in it and as it, and therefore made in the likeness and image of that presence. We have all the qualities of the divine, because on the non-local level, you have to look beyond the five senses when we think about this. At the non-local level, the entirety of the spirit is present. So that the presence is everywhere in its fullness, because this presence is indivisible. So of course the fullness has to be everywhere at the same time on this invisible level. So that's the personal. So as the personal individualized expressions, I like to think of the quality of love, because to me unconditional love is seeing the truth of who we all are, seeing the truth of ourselves, realizing that presence of oneness, and acting from that place of the heart. So that's the personal self. And today we're going to focus on the impersonal self. And it's the title of the article is actually God, the Impersonal Self. So while we have this conscious presence, this individualized expression, uniquely as we are also users of a universal law. And again, it's the all power of that universal law. We sometimes don't realize that. But every time we speak and think, we are using that universal law. And it becomes the law of our being when we repeat the same kind of thing often enough, or when we believe it. So, the thing that's so powerful about this impersonal law is that we can use it consciously. We can stop the habit of just unconsciously repeating the patterns of the past, and we can begin to consciously tailor it to to support, like we're redoing our whole subconscious mind, in other words, to be a beautiful atmosphere in which the spirit of who we are, the unlimited being, that personal self, can flourish and express and enjoy life, and also be in service to others. So with that in mind, there's a quote from Science of Mind, the textbook, on page 104 that I'm inviting us all to repeat, just to ground that in for ourselves. So when I know who I am, which is love, and I know I am using universal power, all doubt as to my ability to use it vanishes. And my words are spoken with a spontaneous reliance on truth. See, this is what happens when we realize who we are and that we are using a universal law, is we become motivated to do something, to be conscious, to use this law consciously, and therefore improve the experience we have in our lives. So I love the term to describe this movement that takes place when we become aware of the personal self and the impersonal self as the presence of God. And that is from reactor to creator. From reactor to creator. And it's so interesting when you look at those two words, they have the exact same letters in them. It's just that the C gets moved over to the front, right? Reactor, creator. I know, it's so cool. I love those things. So the reactor self then is the unconscious self. Yeah? It's the conditioned self, because sometimes we can even be conscious when we are reacting. So it really is the conditioned self. It's the conditioned mind. And when we are reacting, we're coming from the five senses, and we're coming from the old belief structure. And we're seeing danger, or we're seeing something we don't like, or something we think should be different, or shouldn't be happening, whatever it is. And as a result, our whole entire body goes into fight or flight response, which shuts down our ability to function properly, to access the wisdom and the love and all of the goodness that we are. And so the hallmark of the reactor is a resistance to what is, a railing against what is, a complaining about what is. And so, because we know the way the universal law, this impersonal universal law works, is that we get what? More of that, more of the stuff we don't want, and suffering. So I know all of this is kind of repetitive, but isn't it good to be reminded every week? is, that, is that okay? All right, let's get back on track here. I'm talking about myself. Okay, and then the creator self. So when we live as the creator self, we are aware of the multidimensionality of life and of ourselves. We realize that this physical world is an effect, that what we call facts are really effects of thoughts that we've had, or beliefs up until this present moment, or that we've had collectively. That facts, when somebody says, well, that's a fact. Well, it's an effect. Think about that. It's an effect. It's something that can be changed. It's temporary. You know? So the idea that we suddenly become aware that facts are temporary and that they can be changed. And we go to the causal level as creators and realize the causal level is where? It's consciousness, and we can change the subconsciousness by what? Changing our thoughts. That's right. Okay. So our thoughts then, we realize, are the creative cause then of all life experience. So I love the question when we find ourselves in a situation where we are reacting, is to ask the question, what must I learn? To be gentle with ourselves. What must I learn? What's going on here? What's the shift that's being asked for in my mind, in my thoughts? So, the other aspect, the other thing that happens when we become creators is, because we know that we're constantly creating, we start looking for the good. We become vigilant. Okay, and what's the silver lining in this? Okay? Where's the good and what's the silver lining? And we and we begin to appreciate everything as part of our spiritual journey, and even the contrasting things as stimulators of new thought and new innovation and the next evolutionary stage of our consciousness. So everything then becomes part of the journey. Even if it's uncomfortable at times, we realize it's part of the evolutionary process. And so the Creator asks, also realizes that we are here for a higher purpose. We're here to make a contribution. And so the Creator also lives in the mindset of, how can I serve? How can I serve? And I love the reminder when we finish our prayers, our spiritual mind treatment, we end it with what? And so it is. Think about what and so it is means. It means that we believe in the impersonal law, in that automatic response of the universal law to bring whatever word we place into it into manifestation. It's a strong statement of our conviction. And I've looked a little bit more into this thing called conviction. I shared a little while, I think it was last week or maybe the week before, this word conviction that we say so often here, that it's actually it's a knowing. It's actually even beyond a believing. It's beyond. Uh, I was reading something that Ernest Holmes said. It's even beyond faith. It's a knowing. I'm convinced. I know that this is true. So when we do treatment, we often say, well, I know this truth. I know it to be true because we are practicing this energy called conviction, and we're speaking with the authority of ones who are individualizations of the Most High. Think about the way Jesus did when he would tell somebody to stand up and walk, he did it with authority. He understood how the universal law works. And so we are to do the same. And so it is. The other thing about this beautiful teaching is that when we understand that the universal law is working for us, we we don't have to get involved in willpower. So this is not a pull yourself up by the bootstraps philosophy. This is a partnership philosophy, a partnership with the divine. It's about willingness instead of willpower. It takes the struggle out of it. It's like I place my word in the law and I let it go. I release, I let it go, and so it is. And then we go on with our lives. There's more peace, there's more relaxation in this way of being. It's not that struggle and strife of trying to make it happen and go it alone, which is really it's what it says it is. It's struggle and strife. It's not as much fun. Is the bottom line. So it's also important to remember that we are immersed in this thing called what Ernest Holmes called race consciousness, which has nothing to do with with the usual thing we think of when we think of race. He's talking about the human race, all of humanity consciousness. So when he says race consciousness, he's talking about the collective consciousness of humanity. He said we're all affected by it until we specialize the law for our own lives. So part of what's in the Science of Mind textbook, there's some beautiful treatments for detaching ourselves from race consciousness so that we can live more fully as those individualized expressions of the divine that we are meant to be. So when we think about this thing called race consciousness, we also want to think about what is the consciousness that we all inherited? Was it empowering or was it disempowering? And the beauty of it is when we understand the impersonal law, we can move more and more in the direction of an empowering belief structure and let go of the other. So the bottom line is, who do you say you are? Who do you say you are? Because who you say you are is responded to with a resounding yes by the universal law, the impersonal law. The impersonal law, it's everywhere, isn't it? I'm seeing it all over the place, and there's a really great example here at the University of New York University, the Tisch School of the Arts, they are training students to use the impersonal law to gain access to greater creativity. So they teach visualization and they teach affirmations to the students and mindfulness too. Isn't that cool? Yeah, and it's really happening all over the place. This beautiful teaching that we've been grounded and rooted in for so long is spreading far and wide. And so here's the thing about the universal law is that it's important to practice and all of our other spiritual practices to practice when things are good. That means practice all the time. So when things are good and when things are a challenge, because if you practice when things are going well, then when the big challenges come up, and this is what I found with myself, is I return to principle. I return to deepening and listening and using the universal law, this impersonal law, to transform my consciousness so that I can show up in a more loving way. So understanding this and using it in good times strengthens us in the challenging times. Which brings me to what happened 2 years ago. It was about this time 2 years ago when I felt the inner call to expand my ministry, to expand my consciousness. And so I did what I've been taught to do, which means I got involved in more fully in the visioning process. I hooked up with Ray Jordan. How many of you know who Ray Jordan is? She's with Centers for Spiritual Living, and she offers a service of visioning, and she does it like what 8 times? I forget how many times a day, several times a week. And so there's an opportunity to tune in, and she guides you through the visioning process. And so I was doing that 3 and sometimes 4 times a week continuously when I received the inspiration to contact Centers for Spiritual Living. And I knew it was inspiration because I got that whole whoosh, the God bumps and all of that. It's like the the lights were flashing. Trying to get my attention. So I called, and I called thinking maybe I would just take some courses for my own ministry. And they said, "Well, why don't you just join?" I said, "Oh, oh, so what's involved, And of course, it was quite involving. It was like an 8-hour ministry exam, and it was, a lot of paperwork and some fees that we all paid, as practitioners, minister, center, and all of the festivities that many of you have been through in this past year. And by the way, thank you so much for supporting that process. I am so grateful. Uh, but that was a time in which I I reached out for support because I have to say, when I heard of all that was involved in everything, and that it was about bringing the whole spiritual community along with me, that was a bit of a crisis for me. It was a bit of a challenge. So I reached out. I have spiritual practice partners. I love this term in place. I had prayer partners and mentors, and I was in a Mark Anthony Lord ministers circle. I reached out and I asked for support during this time because I know that this universal law, when we work it, it works. And so here we are. We're now Center for Spiritual Living Delaware as a result. So here's the call to action for all of you. Are you willing, for your own sake and for the sake of all that is, to commit to a daily spiritual practice, to deepen your roots in the divine, so that you more fully recognize and realizing who you are, the presence of divine as love, as all of that good that you are, that uniqueness and all those capacities you have, and also to be aware that you are using a universal law, that you are creating all times. So how cool it is to become aware of and use the law consciously. So, are you? That's spiritual practice daily, okay? Even if it's 15 minutes. Okay, and are you willing to ask yourself, when am I most susceptible to giving up? Because we know that is the time to practice. That is the time to practice. That is the time to reach out to others who can support you. That is the time to not walk it alone, but really, truly allow loving community to support you. Because this is what happens is we really serve each other by remembering what is true and real for each other. And it brings us right back to center, which is a beautiful thing. So, what I decided to do is to share with you very briefly now the vision of 2018, because it occurred to me that people are up and moving and stuff with food, and some people leave early. So, I'm just going to briefly share it. It's not a really long thing, but it's very powerful. And then I'm going to ask Melody to speak. So, the vision for 2018 that came out of the visioning process is to embrace more fully the value of spiritual community and take it to the next level. We gather here on Sundays. That's something we do and we do so well. We also, some of us partake in classes, which is more of a small group experience. We do have a sacred circle that gathers once a month as a small, connects with each other deeply, roots more deeply in spiritual practice, acts as spiritual practice partners. We have prayer partners and so on and so forth. Our practitioners gather and connect with each other. All of our other teams and ministries have their own form of connecting. But this model is really a small group model. It's gathering in the big group on Sundays. It is connecting in small groups for greater a deepening of our journey, which only happens in relationship with others. It's very helpful, let's put it that way. And then also we serve. We serve by giving our gifts and contributing what we have to the greater whole. So it's just very easy to remember. Gather, connect, and serve, Dan. Yeah. So it's gathering, connecting, and serving. Those are the key components to it. So the part that we really want to develop this year, or what I'm hearing is being called for, is a greater forming of these beautiful things called small groups, or care groups is what they call them in Centers for Spiritual Living, Greater Philadelphia. And so as we do that, then we become masters of the law, masters of love, and masters of joy. So let's bring Melody up at this point in time. Thank you so much. Let's give her a round of applause. Yes, yes.
I stand behind the lectern. I'm going to pull up the step. Oh, I feel like a big girl now. I'm used to speaking like the Oprah mic wandering around, so I'll be very proper. The slide, The Reactor Creator, could not have been better for a little bit about our experience at the Paoli Center. We 6, 7 years ago, we're in a phase of reacting. There are a group of us who were leaders who would go out to brunch and not necessarily take the most positive approach. Thank you. I was going to ask for the slide. We found ourselves reacting to the silliest little things, like a little gnat that might bite you, and you start focusing on the gnat, and then you see all the bugs. And one day we called it out at brunch. It's like, okay, so what are you going to do about it? And it was like throwing a flag on the play, and we decided to do something, but we didn't know what yet. And Spirit worked as Spirit does. And suddenly the meta model training came up in Chicago with Mark Anthony Lord. So it actually was the original group of 6 several of whom were the people who were looking at the gnats instead of the bigger picture, who went. They came back, spent about a year getting us ready to do what we call our care groups. And it has changed the way we live. We consider ourselves to be a center of small groups. So I just wanted to share a little bit about some of our groups that are existing now, where we started, where we are, and how it's affected our community. And then we'll open it up to questions. If anybody has any, I'll be glad to share. So I do have to open up for notes. We started out about 5 years ago, and we have some groups that have run for 5 years. We have some that lasted, 6 months. You make a 6-month commitment. But it's interesting. Everything we do operates as a small group, from the board to the practitioners to our Sunday volunteers. No, you don't have to go to a meeting all the time, which is one of the joys. So we started with a business success group. How can you take spirituality into your business and make it part of your life in business? Has anybody here ever wondered about that? You ever leave here and think, I wish I could have this with me all the time? Well, this was our way of doing it. So business success met once a month, and people wanted more, so we started meeting every 2 weeks. And that group lasted for about 2 years because the leaders were willing to do that. We have a cooking group. We have a men's wisdom circle, a women's wisdom circle, and of course we call the guys the wise guys, and they have other names for us. It's been very successful. I mean, how often do guys get together and talk about things just with guys? And they would meet for dinner on one Friday night a month. I have a soul collage group. I make soul collage cards. Reverend Kathleen asked me to bring some in. I have a few with me. We have a book club, spiritual book club, inspired entertainment, fun, fit, and fabulous. They go hiking. Then they go horseback riding in the snow. So it's whatever the group would like to do. They go bowling. Our newest group is called Infinite Loops. Anybody have any idea what infinite loops might be? Ping pong. We have a ping pong. Who knew? Spiritual ping pong. But each of our groups have evolved. We have spiritual living groups. Signs of Mind magazine can help you. I asked the leaders, some of us have been leading, like, how much time do you think you spend preparing for your groups? Leadership people go, oh my gosh, I don't know that I want to take on one more thing. The average time spent per month, 45 minutes in preparation for your group. So it's not an overwhelming thing. But I'd just like to share a few things that have made a difference and a few personal stories. I got permission from most of them. So those who have permission, I'll use their name. First, I'd like to share a story about Jerry. Jerry was our treasurer at one point. And that annual meeting, and he had to give the financial report, his hands and his voice were like this every year because he just was not comfortable speaking. So he's an executive chef, and he started this cooking group where the small group of people met and they actually cooked together once a month, and he was the leader. And he got more and more comfortable sharing information and working in his group, so that the next time he had to speak, there was far less of this. Fast forward to now, next year will be the 5th year. Jerry is a professor at the Philadelphia Restaurant School as a full-time instructor there. And he says, absolutely, it's because of his group that he grew comfortable enough to share his knowledge and now created this whole new career for himself. We just had dinner last night and talked about it. It was really nice. There's a woman who I don't have permission. I know she would give it. I'll do my best not to use her name. Just a simple one about a woman who's been coming to the center for probably 15 years. She always comes late. She always sits in the back. She doesn't necessarily act very outgoing. She kind of leaves after she has a cup of coffee and had never said a lot. So she joined our Soul Collage group. And she has blossomed to the point that everybody wants to go talk with her now because she felt comfortable. She was just kind of shy. And she's not late anymore. She approached me. We had a meeting last month. She approached me and she said, I have to tell you, this group has changed my life. Peter is autistic. That's the first thing he'll tell you. And he is brilliant. and he's in several groups. And to have the social outlet with people who love him, there's nobody more loving. The first thing he'll say is, "Now, I'm a little autistic, so I may not always catch the social cues." And he's such an important member and such a loving person and literally brilliant. He also talks about how his groups, I think he's in 3, have changed him. Let me tell you a story about Bob. Um, Bob started coming to our center and got involved pretty quickly. He loved the classes. He loved Dr. Maxine. He would always do extra projects for class. He joined some care groups and really became an important factor for us. He was very quiet to start out with and then became, more and more comfortable sharing and just such an important member. And on Bob's 40, I think, first birthday, he was driving home. He was killed in a head-on accident in Delaware. And to have such a feeling of loss of one of our family members was challenging. But to feel the love of our family members to support him and his family. His mother and stepfather came. We had a service. We had standing room only. Well, there were well over 100 people in the room of people who love Bob from our center. His stepfather is a Methodist minister and rather conservative from southern Delaware. And to see his stepfather stand up and say, Bob had never been happier in his life than when he came and found you. And the relationship, it started with Bob, it started with our groups, it grew out to Bob's involvement in our center into now the relationship we have with this other church in Delaware. Massive, and it's really from the care groups. Yesterday I had my group and I asked them to share some things, and we have a woman named Catherine who said, I came to a few of the different meetings that we had here, and I would come to center once in a while, and then I was coming more and more, and then I got involved in this group, and one day I realized I love the Soul Collage group. I'm sitting here. Why don't I get involved? Why don't I just join? And like that, she took the classes and got involved, and she's one of our most active members. And Johanna, who said, I really wanted to be here today because I've been feeling really lonely this week. So we have big changes, we have little changes. The effect on the community has been very interesting. We have a big annual picnic now that's open to anybody who wants to bring anybody. So it's well over 100 people. Each of the care groups does something that contributes to the picnic. The men's group got, their grill equipment and did all the barbecuing because that's what they like doing. One of the care groups, the Infinite Loops, the ping pong group, and several of their friends got together and create kids games. So it was really important to us. What do each of the groups mean? They're different. They're different, but the core is sharing science of mind and bringing it out into our daily lives. And for having a place where you belong and you want to be. Now, how many of you would love to have a Saturday morning meeting once a month? Kind of 3.5, 4.5 hands. My group's been meeting Saturday mornings once a month for 2 years, a little over 2 years. And people can't wait. Friday night meetings. The men's group, Friday night, it was great. How about a Saturday night meeting? That's when Infinite Loops Ping Pong meets. What a great idea to be able to have a place to go that's not a bar where you can be with friends on a Saturday night. Everything has a structure. We have a outline of what we do that each leader can adapt to the way that works for them, and lots of support. Nobody's alone. Your leader has a support leader. We have so many things titled CSL. We have care support leaders, so here's another CSL thing. But each leader goes to one of us for any challenges that come up. Nobody ever feels alone.
That's what we call leader champions here.
Leader champions. Perfect. Perfect. So we started from that phase of, reacting into now creating. We've had groups for over 5 years. A difference it made to us is that we lost our minister for a very good reason. He went to the Holmes Institute, he went to the main office in Denver, and we were able to operate for 2 years without a minister. To be successful, to continue to grow a little bit during that time, to bring in guest speakers, to have guest musicians. Sharon has sung for us. We have relationships with you, and it was really because of the care groups. We talked about how much that structure made a difference. And then we managed to manifest Dr. Maxine K. Who knew? So I've probably talked enough with things I want to share. Do you have questions for me? Is there anything? This is a more casual time now. Anything that you're concerned about or interested in?
How many groups do you have?
Right now we have about a dozen. And
What's the size of your congregation?
We have 110-ish members, but a typical Sunday is 50 to 65. Yeah.
Are all members in a group?
I wish I brought that statistic because somebody just calculated it. It's like 65 to 70% of the people who come are in at least one care group. So that's a good question. There's a lot of involvement. The other important thing is you don't have to be a member to come to the care groups. So we've found some other people who start coming to the groups, get involved, and they decide they want to be a member, or at least just come to Sunday and be part of us. Any other things? Yes.
How have you, do you advertise about the groups, or is it just within your congregation, or?
They're on the website. We do personal invitations ourselves to the groups. One of the challenges that you may find that we found is that people don't want to leave their group. So the most effective groups are about 9 members. It's kind of like it's time to birth a new group at 9 and 9 months. It's easy to remember. We have some groups that are at 13 because we don't really want to leave some work that way, some don't. But that's about the average. Yes.
Just for us to get an idea, you said your website, are you Center for Spiritual Living Philadelphia or Paoli?
Greater Philadelphia Center for Spiritual Living. And then there's CSL Paoli also. We've been around for 20 some years. I found Science of Mind in 92, and the church was just being chartered at the beginning of 93. So as different groups have evolved, we use both of those names, but GPCSL, Greater Philadelphia Center for Spiritual Living. So other advertising on the website, in our particular groups on Sundays, we always talk about it. Invitations are made to, friends. We have some people from Unitarian churches who come, a couple of Unity churches, church members who come.
I have a question.
Yes.
As far as the groups go, as far as forming a group, is it relaxed? Like someone just says, oh, I'd like to have this kind of a group, or how does that whole process? Or you have this thing you put out and go, okay, I have a bunch of people together. What kind of group would you like to have? And then go from there. How does it get started?
The answer is yes. They have evolved in so many different ways. But we have a system and a support to help that happen. If somebody wanted to have a group that was really not necessarily in keeping with Science of Mind, we wouldn't do that. But if you want to have, spiritual ping pong, they have a structure, what they do, and then they have fun. So if somebody wants to start a group, they generally come to us. There are currently, I think, 7 of us who are leaders, and we talk about it and help them come up with a way of putting it in a structure that works for them.
Okay. And that's what the leader champions here do.
Yeah.
They support groups in getting started.
So you might want to have an Infinite Loops knitting group. We've had different kinds of crafting groups. It doesn't have to be just serious Science of Mind. The Science of Mind magazine offers a whole structure. Are you using those?
No, but I do know about it.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you want to lead a group on the Science of Mind discussion group, the magazine itself will give you a whole outline of kinds of things you can talk about. And then you have resources of people here who are trained practitioners and been around a while who can help with answering any of those questions. Yes?
When you say that they're spiritual groups, like with ping pong, do they talk first and then play ping pong, or do they
Again, yes. We do, just a real quick overview, we do a check-in. Sometimes you just got to say something before you can be present. You know, like I just got stopped by a policeman, or, I saw an accident on the way, or, it's my dog's birthday and it was just the best day. So we do a quick check-in, then we do a treatment. So we have a treat-in, and everybody learns how to do treatment. I don't know if any of you have been around a while and you're still a little bit freaked out by, oh, treatment is, I have to do it just right. One of the things we've learned are there are a lot of ways to do it within the structure that are just right. So we have that treatment. Each group has its own commitment. I brought a couple of sheets to share. If you want them, I'll leave some. We will also share any of our information with you that then you will adapt to fit your center and your culture. But, what are the rules of engagement, so to speak? So we have a group agreement. We share that. Then we begin doing whatever it is we want to do, whether it's a book discussion group, or in our case, making soul collage cards, or the cooking group, we start cooking. And there's a connecting exercise. It was called the love exercise. What do you guys call it? Love exercise, where we have just a general connecting, interesting question. We do the business of the group. We close out with, a checkout. Anybody who has anything to say, and then we do a treatment and we leave. We also follow a strict time schedule of starting and ending, because there's nothing worse than having something that goes on forever and ever, which some of you might be thinking about me right now. Oh, but I digress. So there's a structure right there that's already made for you, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel or feel uncomfortable with that. And the support that you'll get from your leaders will be amazing.
And we do have a leader training manual.
Mm-hmm. I came here for my training. I was part of that original group where we would go out and people had issues, and it was like, okay, so what are you going to do about it? And we realized we needed to do something. They went, came back, then we did the additional training with Mark Anthony Lord right here in this room, and I was part of that. So we have all kinds of information to share with each other. We are sister churches.
Dr. Maxine is my mentor.
Oh, I love her.
Yes, Dr. Maxine Kay is our minister. We, through this process, we were able to manifest her. How cool is that? Anything else that would be helpful? I think the idea that the leaders spend not more than probably 45 minutes a month. It's not an overwhelming thing. You usually have a leader in training with you to just assist. It's fun, it's educational, and it's connecting. So we go from the idea that, when we were reacting, we've created a whole new environment for ourselves. It has been financially rewarding for us as a center. It's been emotionally rewarding. We were able to get out of the basement. Marianne and I were talking about, we had met in the Masonic Lodge, and some of you may have been there in the basement most of the time since 1993. And we would get out and then we would come back in for one reason or another. And we made a commitment and started a capital campaign, and we were able to raise an amazing amount of money. We had 10 days to raise, I think it was $90,000. Within the first 4 days, I believe we had $75,000. It took some really deep core belief that that could happen. Yeah. And now we're in a beautiful new location, and it's bright and shiny like this room. It feels wonderful. Anything else? It's yes. That's great. It is very heart-centered, and if you think of those times where you leave here and it's wonderful and you're with all these great people, and then you go out to work or something else and it feels heavy, this is a way that you keep re-inspiring yourself so that we can make that difference in the world. So it's kind of interesting that each of us is changing the world in our own way, and a lot of it comes from our small groups.
Mm-hmm.
Keep feeding us.
From what you were talking about, I see, when being in groups, I see certain things. Like I was a leader in the Sierra Club, and I would every month I'd have to, we'd have our meeting every month, but I would have to get up there and talk, and I would say to myself, this is a learning experience. This is good for you. It's good to learn how to get up in front of people and talk. You can use these things in other ways outside of this. And that
Yes.
really helped me out. Like when I would have to call people on the phone, in order to get rid of the anxiety, I would get the ironing board out and iron my clothes while I was calling people. So I found ways to adapt my level of and make it work. And so, doing groups is actually helpful to people. I mean, when I did my Sierra Club thing, it was very helpful to me because it helped me develop myself in areas where I was weak. Put it that way. So
Yes.
I really recommend the group thing. I can see from what you're talking about that it really does help out the center itself by helping people develop themselves into more expansive people, I guess, for lack of a better word.
It's a very safe container in which to develop yourself and to have fun and make new friends and live this teaching
Yeah.
and how good it is. Yes, one more.
One thing that I hadn't heard yet, and it was said, and I missed it, is that it develops closer friendships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There were people that I barely knew, particularly the woman I mentioned who always came late. Nobody really knew her, and we didn't think she cared a whole lot because she came late, and she didn't feel that we were necessarily that warm because nobody was reaching out. And we've become very close friends, and what it meant to her. And all kinds of friendships have developed that lead to more social, that lead to inviting more people and having more fun, and just getting Science of Mind out there.
It's an infinite loop.
It is. Okay? All right. Thank you.